You're the one who traded a rifle for this. I've come to buy your water.
Ma'am, I don't sell what I just now bought.
There's a spring in that draw. Only one that ain't failed. $2,000 for these 40 acres. Name a figure past that.
The land's not for sale. Not the water either.
You don't know what I'm offering.
I know I don't want it. Not this man.
You'll change your mind. Men always do.
The hammer went tink, tink against the cold anvil, and then Elias Crane laid his army rifle flat on the mercantile counter and slid it across the wood. The clerk stared the way a man stares at another man signing away his own hands. In trade, Elias wanted one thing, the deed to the Harmon place, 40 acres of black timber and a chimney standing alone like one tooth in an empty jaw. Everyone in the county knew that ground. It had burned twice and buried a family once. Nobody would give $1 for it. Elias gave a good rifle and would not say why. And 3 weeks later, a painted wagon with brass on the harness came climbing his ruined road, carrying the richest woman in the territory. The clerk found his voice when the door was already half open. Elias, that land don't hold nothing but ash and bad luck. Elias settled his hat and looked back once. Then I got it cheap, he said, and stepped out into the white heat of a Wyoming afternoon in 1884. By supper, the whole town of Dry Fork would be turning the trade over like a strange coin, unable to guess what a sane man could want with the worst ground in the world. They called him foolish, a farrier without a forge, an army man without a war, a widower without so much as a milk cow to his name. He had come to the territory 2 years back with a wagon, a wife, and a plan, and had buried the wife and burned the plan and kept the wagon. Men said it plainly. Grief had finally cracked him clean through. Elias let them say it. He had learned a man could carry a great deal so long as he did not have to explain it out loud. The Harmon place met him like a wound that had scabbed and split again. The chimney stood black against a sky bleached near to bone. He walked the whole 40 slow, the way he had once walked a battlefield after the guns quit. A bent kettle, a child's boot heel, curled hard as a chestnut. He did not let himself think about the family buried at the far fence, because a man who thinks too long on the dead in a place like that will never lift a single board. That first evening he began to clear the fallen timbers by hand, because motion was the only prayer he had left that still answered him. His palms cracked and bled inside the first hour. When the light failed, he had cleared a space no bigger than a grave, and he lay down in it under the open chimney with his coat for a pillow, and slept the way he had not slept in a house in 2 years. By the second day, the county rode past on purpose. A rancher named Tolliver reined up at the foot of the road and watched Elias sweat. Man could break himself on that ground for 10 years and have nothing to show but calluses, Tolliver called. Sell it back to the bank and quit while your hands still work. Elias did not stop dragging his beam. Obliged for the counsel, he said, and Tolliver rode off carrying the tale down to Dry Fork, that the widower had gone clean into simple. He did not tell the town the truth, because the truth was small and shameful. His wife, Sarah, had wanted a place with green in it. She had said it plain there last spring, tired of dust on the sill and a well that gave up mud. She had died on that rented ground in a hard march, wanting water she never got. Her lips cracked at the end, though he wet them with a cloth every hour. He had not been able to get his own wife a drink of clean water, and he carried that the way other men carry a bullet the surgeon could not reach. So when Elias walked the burned acres that first week and knelt in the low corner by the cottonwoods and found the earth there dark and cool against his palm, he had gone very still. There was moss where no moss had any business growing in a drought. He dug with his fingers and heard, under the char, a small living sound. A spring. To Elias it meant Sarah had been right, that there was green to be had in this country if a man only looked low enough, and he could not bear to sell the one place on earth that proved her right and him too late. That was the summer the whole territory went to powder. No rain since the thaw. Creeks that ran silver in June lay down like dead snakes by July, Cattle bawled at dry cut banks for water that was not there. Across the county, the Verhagen brand, the herd folk still called the cattle queens, though her husband was 4 years in the ground, ran near 2,000 head that all needed to drink. Everyone knew whose creek had failed and whose still trickled. Everyone but Elias. So he did not understand, at first, why the fine wagon came. He was up a ladder at the chimney when he heard the brass harness ring and watched a matched team draw a woman up his road. She sat straight as a fence post, her dress good gray wool cut by a real hand, silver at her ears, and silver worked through her hair, and a face that had been handsome for 50 years and did not intend to stop now. An old bow-legged hand rode beside her. That would be Pike. "You're the one who traded a rifle for this," she said. Not a question. Her voice was clipped and even, a voice used to being the last one that mattered in any room. "I'm Adelaide Verhagen. I've come to buy your water." Elias came down the ladder slow, wiping char on his trousers. He had not known there was water anyone but him could want, nor that his low corner showed on any map but the one in his own chest. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't sell what I just now bought." She did not blink. From the wagon seat she looked past him at the ring of cottonwoods where the ground went dark, and Elias watched her see it, the exact green corner he had knelt in, and understood, cold in his stomach, that she had come knowing. "There is a spring in that draw," Adelaide said, "the only one within 2 days' drive that has not failed. Your neighbor's cattle are dying on their feet, and mine will follow inside the month. I will give you $2,000 for these 40 acres. Name a figure past that, and we will be done by dark." Pike shifted in his saddle and would not look at either of them. $2,000 was a sum to buy a life with, a fresh start 3 territories away where no one knew his grief. Elias felt something go hard and quiet in him, the old army stillness before a bad order. "The land's not for sale," he said. "Not the water either." She had expected greed and could have met greed. She had not expected a stone. "You don't know what I'm offering," she said. "I know I don't want it," Elias answered. For a long moment, the only sound was the dry wind, and the two of them held there, the woman who had never once been refused, and the man who had nothing left to lose by refusing. Then she gathered her reins. "You will change your mind," Adelaide said, "when you have gone a winter on nothing but principle. Men always do." "Not this man," said Elias. The brass rang away down the road, and he stood in the ruin, with his heart going like a struck anvil, feeling he had won something, and could not name why it sat in him like a loss. She came back the next morning, not with the fine wagon this time, but on a plain buckskin horse, alone, before the heat. Elias was at the spring with a shovel, cleaning the char out of the little pool. He heard her rein up and did not turn. "I have thought on it," Adelaide said to his back. "You will not sell. Very well, then I would buy the use of it. My cattle to drink here, a fair sum by the head, for the season. You keep your deed and your stubbornness both." It cost her to say it plain. He could hear the cost in the flatness of it. Elias leaned on the shovel. Up close, out of the fine wagon. She was older and more tired than she let the county see. Her straight back held at a price he recognized because he paid the same one. "Why did your husband's men not come?" he said. "You've got 40 riders, they tell me. Why ride up here yourself, at dawn, alone?" Adelaide's jaw set. "Because it is my herd, my brand, and my mistake if I lose it. I don't send a man to beg what I can beg myself." That word, beg, landed between them like a dropped stone, and neither of them moved to pick it up. But he looked at the spring he had cleared with his own hands, and thought of Sarah wanting green, and something in the woman's plain begging reached the plain grief in him and turned a key he had thought rusted shut. "No money," he said at last. Adelaide stiffened, mistaking it for another refusal. "I mean, I won't take money for water. A man doesn't sell a drink to a dying beast and call himself decent. But you can bring your cattle, a few head at a time, mornings, when it's cool." "I always pay my way," she said. There was warning in it, as though a debt she could not settle was worse to her than a herd she could not water. "Then pay it in work," Elias answered, and turned back to his shovel, and did not see the way she sat her horse, a full minute longer, staring at the back of the man who had refused her money twice and offered her the one thing money could not buy. She rode down to fetch the first bunch, and Pike said, "Well?" And Adelaide said only, "We water at dawn, and I am to haul his timber like a hired girl. Say one word, Pike, and I'll leave you afoot." That was how the strangest bargain in the county came to be. Every morning that dry summer, before the sun cleared the ridge, Adelaide Verhagen and old Pike drove 20 and 30 head at a time up the ruined road, and while the cattle drank, the richest woman in the territory did work she had not done with her own hands in 20 years. She hauled timber. She stacked stone until her gloves wore through at the palm. She learned the weight of a full pail on a rope. They did not talk much at first. She would move her cattle through in small, patient bunches, counting under her breath, always counting. A woman who knew to the head what she stood to lose. Elias could not square her with the womanfolk described. Cold, they said down at Dry Fork. He saw instead a woman who had carried a dead man's whole world on her own 2 shoulders for 4 years and let no one see her stagger under it. He knew that walk. He walked it himself. One morning, a heifer went down at the edge of the pool, too weak with the heat to rise, and Adelaide was off her horse and into the mud before Pike could move, her good gray skirt black to the knee. Elias set his shoulder to the beast's ribs, and together they got it up and drinking. She stood in the mud, breathing hard, silver hair come loose across her cheek. "Lost 40 head already this season," she said, to the water, not to him. "Counted them into the ground myself. I won't count this one." One morning she asked him, plain, why a man cleared a house he did not mean to rebuild. "A thing broke ought to be squared up," he said. "Even if it's only to look at." Adelaide considered it. "My husband said the same of accounts. Died with every column straight, and the drought coming, and no rain set aside against it, because rain don't enter in a ledger. It's a hard thing to inherit a tidy man's world, and find it don't hold water." She caught her own pun a beat late, and something almost like a smile crossed her, the first Elias had seen. If this story is already sitting somewhere behind your ribs, stay with me to the end. The best of it is still coming, and I think it will be worth your while. Now let me tell you about the morning the bell rang wrong. On the 3rd week, the church bell down in Dry Fork rang cracked and flat at midday, and by evening, the reason had climbed Elias's road on the tongue of a passing freighter. The cattle queen, the town said, was up at the mad widower's burned place every dawn, alone, doing field hand work in the dirt, and folk did not know which was the greater scandal, a woman of her standing lowering herself so, or a poor man letting her. It had started at the feed store, where Mrs. Dell measured out flour with a mouth that could not abide a full silence. "A widow her age," she had said, loud enough for the counter to hear. "Haulin' timber, for a man who buried his wife not 2 springs gone. There's a name for a woman forgets herself like that, and it ain't Mrs." A proud woman brought low, made a cool drink on a hot day for folk who had never had 2,000 of anything to lose. "They're talking, Mrs.," Pike finally allowed, hat crushed in his 2 hands. "Down at the feed store, Mrs. Dell and them, talking ugly about you coming up here to a man's place alone." Adelaide drove her count of cattle through the water and did not slow. "Let them," she said. But Elias saw her hands on the rope go white at the knuckle, and saw that even a woman with 2,000 head could be made small by a circle of women at a feed store counter. Wealth only gave the town a taller thing to aim at. He surprised himself by speaking. "You could send your men and stay home," he said. "I'd let them water the herd same as you. The talk would die for want of feeding." Adelaide turned on him with something fierce and near to grateful and unwilling to be either. "Is that what you want?" she said. "To be shut of me, to have your ruin back to yourself and your grief undisturbed." And Elias, who had come to this black acre precisely to be shut of everyone, opened his mouth to say yes, and found he could not make it come. "No," he said instead, and the truth of it startled them both into silence. That evening, Elias sat on the one sound step of the burned house and let himself remember. Sarah laughing at his dour face, telling him he loved things by fixing them, and could never once just let a thing be loved as it was. You'd mend a cloud, she used to say, if it dripped on you. He had come out here to fix a ruined place, because a ruined place could not need him or die on him. And now, a gray-eyed woman was calling something up out of the ground he had meant to keep sealed. The next dawn, he did a small thing that cost him more than the town would ever guess. He rose before her and walked to the head of his road and unhitched the drop pole, the gate he had kept barred against the whole world since the day of the trade, and leaned it open against the fence and left it so. When Adelaide came up with her cattle, she saw the open gate and drew rein and stared at it a long moment. Elias, watching from the chimney, saw her understand it for the thing it was. Not a bargain, not a debt. A door left open on purpose by a man who barred everything. She said nothing about it, but she rode through it soft, and she did not haul timber that morning. She came and stood by him at the spring instead. "My husband bought that land I run on for the grass," she said, out of the quiet. "Never gave a thought to drought. Said the good Lord would send rain to men who worked. Then he died in an easy autumn, with the ponds full, and left me the working, and the Lord sent me this." Her mouth twisted. 2,000 head, 40 riders, a house with 11 rooms, and I have come to a burned nowhere to beg a widower for a drink. "You want to know why I do it myself, Mr. Crane," she went on, and her even voice had gone rough at the bottom. "Because if I lose that herd, I lose the only thing left that has his name on it, and mine grown into it these 4 years. Folk think I'm cold. Folk think I love the money. I don't. I love that I built the thing up from what he left crooked and made it stand, and I will crawl up this road on my knees before I let it die of my pride." Elias looked at her then, really looked, the way he had not let himself look at a living woman in 2 years. "I understand, keeping a place, because of who wanted it," he said. It was as near as he had ever come to naming Sarah aloud. Adelaide caught the whole weight under the small words, and she did not pry, and that not prying was the kindest thing anyone had done him since the burying. They stood together while the cattle drank, 2 people who had each turned their grief into a fortress, standing at the one gate each had left, without meaning to, ajar. When she reached to steady a pail he was hauling, and her bare hand closed warm over his on the wet rope, Elias let it stay 1 breath, 2, and then pulled his hand free as if the rope had turned to fire. "I'll finish this," he said, rough, and turned his back, and hated the flat, dead sound of his own voice. Adelaide stood with her emptied hand, still half raised in the morning light, and pride came down over her face, swift as a lamp carried out of a room. She called quiet to Pike that they had watered enough and would go. The gate was open. She rode out through it stiff-backed, and did not look at the man who could not let himself be helped, and Pike glanced back once at Elias with a look that said more than an old cowhand had any right to say. He told himself all that day, splitting rails he did not need, that he had bought a ruin to be left in peace, and peace was what he had preserved. But the spring ran on clean in the corner Sarah would have loved, and Adelaide's cattle no longer sounded up his road at dawn, and by the 3rd silent morning, Elias understood he had done again the thing his wife had named him for. He had tried to keep a thing safe by holding it so tight he strangled it. What broke the silence was not tenderness, it was a bank. On the 5th day, a rider came up the open road at a hard trot and handed down a folded paper, stamped with the seal of the Dry Fork Land and Cattle Bank. Adelaide had borrowed against the Verhagen ground in her hardest years, and the note had come due, and the drought had made her cattle worth pennies on the hoof. Now the bank's men had gone hunting whatever else the widow's debt might touch, and what they had found was a burned 40 acres with a spring on it. The rider was blunt about it. "Bank wants you to know, mister, they'll be sending a territory surveyor up to settle the water on the old Harmon plat. Seems there's a question of rights was never rightly closed. If it falls the bank's way, that spring goes toward the widow's note, and she drinks last, if she drinks at all. Ain't my doin', I just carry the paper." Then he rode off, and Elias felt the ground he had bought for grief turn into a weapon aimed at the one person who had come climbing up out of the whole hard world to him. That night was the longest he had spent since the burying. He sat by a low fire in the shell of the house, and under all his reasoning coiled the ugly small voice grief keeps, the one that whispers the safest thing is to strike first, to bar every gate forever, to let the proud woman who had pulled her warm hand off his rope go down into ruin so that he might never again fear the day she left him standing. He had loved a thing once by holding it, and it had died in his hands anyway. Better, the voice said, to hold nothing at all. He knew the voice for what it was. He had heard it over Sarah's grave, telling him to sell out and never plant a living thing again where it could wither. Now it spoke sweet and reasonable in the firelight, and Elias found that he was sick to death of obeying it. Toward morning he took a lantern down to the spring and knelt in the dark by the water Sarah would have loved, and said her name out loud for the first time in 2 years, and his voice broke on the single word. "I couldn't get you water," he told the pool. "Whole reason I'm here is I couldn't get you the one plain thing you asked for, and I have been punishing this ground ever since for not being able to save you with it." And it seemed to him, kneeling there, that Sarah's true voice, not the cold fortress voice he had made of her to keep himself company in his misery, would not thank him for hoarding a spring against a living woman who needed it to save all she had left. That she would call him a fool the old warm way, and tell him a thing kept from love is not saved. It is only buried. He stood up in the gray light and knew what he was going to do. The territory surveyor came on a Thursday, a spare, precise man named Voss, and he was not alone. Word of a water fight travels faster than water in a dry country. Half of Dry Fork rode up behind him. The bank's lawyer in a black coat gone gray with road dust, Mrs. Dell and 2 women from the feed store, 3 ranchers whose cattle were dying on cracked mud, and, at the very back, come because she would not hide from her own undoing, Adelaide Verhagen. Someone rolled an empty barrel out of the wreck for the surveyor to lay his papers on. Elias stood by the spring he had cleaned with his own 2 hands and watched the whole county come to divide it. Voss unrolled the bank's copy on the barrelhead and asked, in his dry official way, whether the deed holder had any original documents pertaining to the Harmon water. The lawyer smiled a small smile, certain the burned nowhere held nothing but ash. Adelaide did not move at all, her gloved hands folded on her saddle horn, though Elias could see what it cost her to sit there and watch strangers weigh her life on a barrel. Elias stepped forward. He drew from inside his coat the loose folded paper he had found behind the deed, and laid it flat on the barrelhead in the sun. Voss bent over it with his glass. The yard went still enough to hear the cottonwoods tick in the heat. The surveyor read, and read again, then straightened slowly and read it aloud, so all the county could hear, in the flat voice of a man reading a thing he cannot argue with, an original water rights survey of the spring, filed and sealed in 1868, 16 years before, granting the holder of the Harmon 41st and senior right to that water, above the bank, above the valley, above every claim filed since. A murmur ran through the crowd like wind through dry grass. The bank's lawyer began to speak, and Voss held up one flat hand without looking at him. The senior right is clear and recorded, filed proper and never lapsed, the surveyor said. It supersedes the note. It supersedes every later claim in the valley. This water belongs, first and wholly, to whoever holds this deed. Every face in the yard turned to Elias Crane, the mad widower who had traded a good rifle for ash, and understood in one indrawn breath that he had, without knowing it, without meaning to, bought the single most valuable 40 acres in 100 dry miles. What had been worthless to every soul who ever stood on it was, and had been all along, everything. But Elias was not looking at the crowd. He was looking at Adelaide, and she was not looking at him with joy. She had gone white to the lips, her gloved hands knotted hard in her reins, and what was on her face was not relief, but a deep and terrible wounding, because she saw, in the same instant the whole county saw it, what her mornings must now look like from the outside. The cattle queen who had begged and hauled his timber like a hired girl, come every dawn to the one man who had held, all the while, the deed to her whole salvation. In the arithmetic of a proud woman, it read only one way, and it read cruel. He had let her beg for what he could have named a king's price for, and let her work it off in sweat, and now the whole town stood witness to how low the Verhagen widow had been brought, and by whom. "You knew," she said. Her voice did not rise. That was the worst of it. It came out flat, and even as the day she first named her offer, but hollowed now, scraped out to the bone. "All those mornings, you held the senior right, and you watched me haul your timber, and you said nothing to me. Nothing." Elias took a step toward her. "I didn't know what that paper was until 5 days passed," he said, and his voice would not come steady. "I found it the same as the bank did, folded behind the deed, a thing I couldn't read the worth of. I have not slept a whole night since, working out how to give it to you, and not from you." Adelaide, but she had already turned her buckskin. Her straight back held at a cost he could see plain from across the yard, and she rode out through the open gate he had left for her weeks before, past all the staring, hungry faces, and did not look back. He let her go that day, because a proud woman shamed before the whole town needs a road out more than she needs a word. But he did not bar the gate behind her. He sent the bank's black coat down the road with nothing. Then he turned to the 3 ranchers whose herds were dying, and told them they could water at his spring, no charge, mornings, so long as they did not crowd the widow's cattle. For the widow's cattle came first, he said, and would as long as he held the deed. Then Elias sat down on the sound step of the burned house with the 16-year-old survey in his hands and thought a long time about the difference between a thing that is buried and a thing that is saved. He knew that if he let her pride and his silence stand, he would have proved his own worst voice right. He would have lost her cheap and called it peace. He went down the valley the next morning, not with a wagon of goods and not with the deed held out as a bribe. He went on foot the last mile, the way a man walks to a grave or to a door he is afraid of. And his heart went tink, tink like a hammer on a cold anvil the whole way down. Old Pike met him at the yard fence. "She know you're comin'?" "No," said Elias. Pike chewed on that a while. "She ain't slept. 2 nights. Don't say why. A man could guess." And he lifted the loop and opened the gate. Adelaide came out onto the wide porch and stood at the top of the steps and did not ask him up them. The distance was on purpose, and Elias let her keep it, standing in the dust at the bottom with his hat in his 2 rough hands. "I brought you this," he said, and held up not the deed, but a fresh, clean copy of the survey. "The senior right, the first draw off that spring, in writing, for as long as there is water in the ground and breath in me. No charge, no lien. Your herd won't die." He saw her face harden, not soften, and knew he had come at it wrong. "So now it is charity," Adelaide said, and the word came out colder than her begging had ever been. "You would put my ruin down in writing and hand it to me across the yard where my own men can see. You would make me the beggar on paper, signed and sealed. Keep your paper, Mr. Crane. I paid my way in timber and stone every morning, and I will pay the rest in cash, or I will let those cattle die honest and clean before I take a widower's pity dressed up as a deed." And Elias felt the whole thing slipping, and knew he had one true thing left, and only the one. Here he did the hardest labor of his life, which was not to hand over water, but to hand over the truth he had buried deeper than any spring. "It isn't charity," he said, "and it isn't the water I came about at all. I came about the rope." Adelaide went still on the steps, her hand on the door. "You put your hand over mine, and I pulled it back like a coward, and I have been pulling my hand back from every living thing since the day I put my wife in the ground, because I couldn't get her the one thing she asked me for, which was water, and green, and a life that didn't dry up around her. And then you came up my road, and hauled my timber, and I stopped grieving, and started living, and it scared me worse than any shot fired at me in 4 years of war." He drew a breath that shook the whole length of him. "I don't want your money. I never once wanted the ranch, nor the herd, nor the water even, except that it brought you up my road at dawn. I wanted the mornings. I wanted the woman fool enough to beg, and proud enough to break her own back, paying for what she begged. I have got no house yet, and 40 acres of ash, and a chimney that stands for nothing, and I am asking you anyway, because I am done burying things that ought to be saved. I want you, Adelaide. That is the whole and the bottom of it, not the deed. You." And he stopped, empty of words, and waited for the door to close between them for good. For a long moment, there was only the dry wind and, far off, cattle bawling for water. Elias watched the shutter that had come down over her lit window, her whole hard widowed life begin, very slowly, to lift. "I am 51 years old," she said, and her even voice cracked clean through at last. "I have buried a husband and run his brand alone through 4 dry years, and I did not think I would ever again in this life be asked for anything but my signature." She came down one step, and then another. "You are a stubborn, ruined, foolish man who traded a good rifle for a chimney and a hole full of water." Another step, and another, until she stood on the last one, near level with his eyes at last. "And it is a fortunate thing," she said, low, "that I never did want your ranch, Elias Crane. Because I find that I would take you with no ranch at all. No water, no deed, and nothing but the ash." She came down into the dust where he stood, and this time she did not lay her hand over his and wait to be refused. She took it, whole, and held it fast, and this time he did not pull away. He turned his rough farrier's hand palm up in hers and closed it careful as a man cupping water in a dry country. The two of them stood in the yard hand in hand, while old Pike over by the gate had to draw a knuckle roughly across each eye. "Lift with your legs, boss," he called out, thick and none too steady. "Not with your back," and the sound Adelaide made against Elias's shoulder was half a sob and half a laugh, the first easy thing to come up out of her in 4 dry years, and he held it, and her, and did not let go. They were married that autumn, when the rains finally broke over Wyoming, and the creeks got up off their beds and ran silver again, and the spring in the burned corner ran on regardless, senior and sure. The county that had called Elias mad now called him the shrewdest trade in the territory, and he let them. He had bought a ruin to bury a thing in, and a hard gray woman had dug it back up into the light before he could finish the burying. The first thing built on the whole place was not a wall, and not a barn, but a fence, with a gate that Elias hung himself, squared and true, and never once, from that day to the end of his days, barred against a living soul. What had been worthless to everyone who ever stood on that ground had been, all along, everything to the two who truly needed it. 2 people the whole world had written off as ash, who turned out to hold, between them, the only living water for 100 miles. A thing kept from love is not saved. It is only buried. He had learned that kneeling in the dark, and he did not mean to unlearn it. In the years that followed, when travelers asked the old couple why the gate at the head of the road was never shut, Adelaide would answer for them both. "Because we each kept a thing locked up so tight it near died in our hands," she would say. "And we don't do that anymore, the 2 of us." Then she would take up the tin dipper that hung by the spring and fill it and hold it out to whatever dry-throated stranger had come climbing up their road. And Elias would think that Sarah had been right about him all along and had got her green at last. These stories are made with love. If this one stayed with you, subscribe to the channel and sit with us by the fire again. That is all I ask.